So yesterday's video, I was talking about how it was about a video I seen. It was actually a YouTube short I'd seen about a woman, young woman, that was out in the woods collecting firewood. This is the fourth trip I have to make to go out and collect firewood for, I guess, heating, cooking, and heating up hot water. You need planning. You need to be able to plan ahead a little bit. And I talked about how we have tons of firewood out there. I don't know how much we got now, 13 years, 12 years. But initially, we had 15 years worth of firewood, and we're going to start adding to it again. The reason we did that was planning, in case when I get older, I can't go out and get firewood anymore. We'll have some. If at some point I live beyond my abilities to get firewood, I can buy it at that point from whoever's selling it, but I don't have to buy it for the rest of my life. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to die and have a ton of firewood left over. That would seem wasteful. I'm sure somebody could sell it, but you get the point. Planning. I'm planning ahead, 15 years ahead, as a matter of fact. And the other thing is it's nice to have dry firewood. Got 15 years of firewood. I don't have to worry about having to wait for firewood to dry out to get down to that 20% moisture level. So today, I'm not running the wood stove, at least right this minute. I started it up this morning. Of course, temperature's getting a little bit warmer, so I don't have to start up near as much. But I started up this morning. It was 64 degrees in the house, and I didn't even pack it that full today. And it got up to in the 80s. As a matter of fact, maybe you can see that it says 81, and it was sitting on the floor. Earlier it said 84. It was sitting on my desk. This thing keeps us warm for a very long time. I think it's around noon right now. So I started at 4:30 this morning. Well, roughly 4:30, maybe 4:45, somewhere around there. But you get the point. So the temperature holds very well in here. But again, because of planning. I remember when I moved here and I said I was going to burn 1 cord of firewood per year. You're an idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's going to take a ton of firewood. They knew when they were saying this that I was going to build a tiny house. They should have known, because I kept saying that these new wood stoves are efficient. This one, about 8 hours is what it lasts. Now you can get some that supposedly last 12 hours, but 8 hours. So I light it about 3 times a day when it's really cold. See, it's still putting out a little bit of heat. I mean, I can touch it. It's not frying my hand but it's still putting out, some heat. 8 hours. So if it was really cold, I'd probably be starting it about now. Maybe about an hour ago, whatever the case is. But it's just not that hard. I mean, I reach over here and I grab the firewood that we bring in a few times a week, depending on the temperature outside, of course. Now, Carolyn split. Now, I want to be clear on this. Since it's getting closer to the end of the year, the season, cold season, we're not bringing as much firewood in the house. I try during the bulk of the cold season to leave about 2 weeks worth of firewood in here. I have 3 areas throughout the house that I store firewood. And as soon as 4 areas, sorry. And as soon as one area runs out, I fill it back up and I start pulling from another area. So this area I usually have full right here. There's only this one knotty piece that's just way too big to burn in this warmer season. And I only have 1 filled here and 1 filled here. So out of the 4, I only got 2 filled right now. Again, because again, towards the end of the season, what I don't want to happen is have to carry a bunch of firewood back out of the house at the end of the season. Carolyn split a little bit of firewood maybe 3 or 4 days ago. Again, just out of this one little section here. And then I split some today. So, we're talking between the two of us, we only have to go out once a week to do it. She does it once, I do it once. It's just not a lot of work. Now, when I say split firewood, we didn't split it small enough when we initially got it. We split it to the size of that Franklin wood stove we had down there as a heat exchanger. But now we have this wood stove, we got to split it a little bit smaller. So we take a little hatchet and a little 5-pound hammer and we split it. We check each piece with the moisture tester. We'll bring it in, stack it up. That way, if it's wet outside, it gives it a few days to dry, get all that moisture out of there from the rain and the snow. But I'm telling you, I keep watching these videos. What it is I'm going and typing in on the search engine off-grid or off-grid living or something. And really all you see in that is how difficult it is to live off-grid. And I'm really confused. And the first thing they always do in every video is, these off-gridders, they don't know what they're lying to you. And I promise you, I am not lying. I'm 52 years old. I'm not an old man. Carolyn's 62. But I'm getting up there in age. You know, I feel different aches and pains in my elbow from splitting that wood, I think. It's starting to ache. But I remember when I was in my 30s how this developed. I was building, I don't know, something, a porch or something, and I was using a hand drill to screw in to the boards. And it started hurting back then. Well, it must have healed up. But I guess it was injured, and now that I'm using that hammer, it's injured again. I should get a brace for it, no big deal. I don't see this life as very difficult. I really don't. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. The key to this is I don't have a job, a full-time job, for an employer, where I got to drive 30 miles every day in snow in the wintertime. It's just an accident waiting to happen. It's a deathbed waiting to happen. Some people manage to survive it, but some people don't. And I remember 2 instances in my life where I thought, strike one, and then another one, strike two. It was just a matter of time before I got dead in a snowstorm. Doing a little bit of work around here instead of a lot of work for an employer just doesn't seem like a big deal to me. I make these YouTube videos to work a little, so supplement some income. But I watched another video today, and the guy was just whining. Now, he's younger than me, and he has a baby, so that kind of tells you his age. I would say he's probably late 30s. His wife looks like maybe she's a little bit younger. Should have plenty of energy to do things. And he was explaining why it's impossible to live off-grid, like these YouTubers are telling you. It's just not possible. So he's loading the wood stove. Now, you see that I don't have this running right now. Of course, it's a little bit warmer outside, but it doesn't run all the time. I light it 3 times a day. It's no big deal. And he was talking about that he just got through a flu. He had the flu. And that it was impossible to work the wood stove while he was sick, because he would have to go outside 2 times a day to get firewood to load it up. What do you mean you got to go outside 2 times a day to load it up? I just showed you that I got firewood in here. I'm not moving the camera all over the place. It's kind of where I want it. But there's firewood within reach. There's probably a week's worth of firewood in this house. So I don't have to go out every day or every 12 hours to get firewood. Secondly, why is he going out every 12 hours to get firewood? He should bring it inside so it will dry off. He has one of these more modern wood stoves. His must be a little bit older. He said it was 65% efficient. Mine's 85% efficient, which is incredible because this is not very fancy compared to what he had. He's got the catalytic converter thing. I don't have that. I just got the air tubes. And then when the baby's asleep, he likes to let his baby sleep on his chest. You have to get up and you have to wake her up to load the wood stove. Okay, let's do some planning here. Let's figure this out. Instead of waiting until it dies, and you know the baby's going to want to lay on your chest, throw a little bit of firewood in. Maybe 1 stick. That's all you need to do, just to keep it churning for a little while longer so the baby can sleep. And he says, of course, it interrupts my nap. So what it is he got laid off, which is, that's fine. I'm not upset. And he has retirement from the VA, from the vet, being a vet. Okay, that's great. So basically, he's like me. I make a little bit of money. He makes a little bit of money. That's fair. But he just doesn't want to seem to do any work. And he talks about his past, that he was in New York as a starving artist. And apparently, he's an artist. And that he was only eating 1 hot dog a day. Well, that kind of explains things. So I'm reading the comments, and one of the comments said, "You must be from California." He says, "No, Michigan." Now, like I said, in another video, he was talking about living in New York, and he didn't get it. He didn't get the comment about, you must be from California, where he wants to be off-grid in case something happens And that's apparently the only reason you live off grid is so something happens. I live off grid because I want to. It's relaxing. It's nice. It's not hard work. He didn't get the point, but he is from New York. So maybe if the guy would have said New York, he was, oh yeah, I'm from New York. In another video, he talks about how he wants to make his off-grid property as automatic as possible, automation. He wants to just for it to do himself. I guess so he can take naps and lay in bed all day. And he doesn't want to start the wood stove. I don't consider myself really active. I'm kind of lazy. And here's what I say when I'm lazy. Work smarter, not harder. And I'm all for that. If you can figure out a way to make things easier, you should go for it. There's no reason to just beat yourself to death every day. I'm not dismissing the idea of having an automated place, but you still got to get out of bed and you got to do something. It gives you a little bit of reward to starting the wood stove. I enjoy it. It's one of the most pleasurable things I do every day. I fill the IBC tank with water. It's just not that hard. You take a garden hose and you stick it in the tank and you fill it up. Feed the chickens once a day. Somebody's going to say, that's this new generation for you. And I guess there's something to say about that. I don't like grouping everybody together like. And he says, I don't know how you could live without any technology as a backup source. Okay, well, let's think about this. My grandparents lived in kind of a modern-ish type of homes. They lived in two while I was alive. The first one they lived in maybe 14 years of my life. They built that house. It had electric and a well and all the stuff, but they heated with wood. Now, I would imagine my grandparents were in their 50s when I was born. I don't know the exact age that they were when I was born, but they were doing it then. They did. My Aunt Susie was the youngest of the four, my aunts and uncles, and she went off to college. I can remember her going off to college. So she graduated high school before I was probably 10 years old. So they did everything themselves. So they would bring in firewood for a full-size house for 2 wood stoves. Back then they didn't have efficient ones. They had one in the dining room, they had one in the living room, and it was an old Franklin living room. That was not a very efficient one that they had. But then they moved into a log house that she built. I don't want to get into that story right now. It was basically 2 stories, but it had a full-size livable basement. I mean, they had a bedroom down there. So however you want to calculate that. They had a wood furnace then, and they put the wood furnace down in the basement, so it would kick on, shut off, kick on, shut off, based on the thermostat. And they would go outside every day, probably 6 o'clock in the morning, open up the basement window, and they'd start chucking firewood into the basement, into the wood furnace area. And they would put in enough firewood into the basement to last all day. Once a day, that's all they have to do. And in the old house, they had this wooden tub that she built, and they would roll it to the back door. They'd start carrying firewood up to the back door, and they throw it in the wooden tub, and then they take the wooden tub, bring it back into where the wood stove was. It just makes logical sense. That way, if you're sick, you can just go in and throw some logs into the wood stove. I mean, they're saying that we off-gridders, YouTube off-gridders, are liars. We're not liars. You're just not doing it the way we're doing it. I live in a tiny house. It's not that difficult to heat. I'm not lying. I'm just doing it different than you. You're trying to heat a full-size house, keep a baby warm, and you don't want to do anything. You just want to lay around. Carolyn was telling me, when she had a mobile home, they had a wood stove, and they had one of those dollies, 2-wheel dollies, that would break down, and then you could make it kind of into like a wagon, so it would lay down and had 4 wheels. And they would take and load that up each day, put a strap on it, set it next to the wood stove. 1 trip a day. These people don't want to do that. If you're going outside twice a day, I mean, really, how bad is that? Well, I got the flu. I've been sick since we've lived here. There was one winter, I was sick all winter. There was something wrong. I'm a sinus infection. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So I was sick. I remember Carolyn asked me to go down there and work on the chicken run. We wanted to raise it up higher. We had it at 3 feet, and she wanted it at 6 feet. And I was plumb wore out. So I understand what it's like to be sick, but that doesn't mean you just shut down. You can't do anything. I drove from Missouri to Wisconsin to do a job, because I was a consultant, with the worst flu of my life. It was terrible. My ex-wife, my wife at the time, drove me up there, and every little while she'd pull over so I could, you know, you just fight through these things. It doesn't matter if you live off grid or if you live in a house. You gotta do things. You can't just shut down. I'm really frustrated with the way society has turned out. We've went from a pretty good society to just garbage. Now, like I said, I'm sure that when I was in my 20s and 30s, people were talking about how lazy my generation was. He literally said on a YouTube video, I had to get up and start to firewood, interrupt my nap. So if you click this up next box, it'll take you to that video where I was talking about that gal complaining about having to collect firewood out in the woods. So I hope I can inspire you to do something while you're living your dreams. Thanks for watching.